veins and arteries that are connected to it, the lungs, and please notice that the lungs have both the airways, or the tubes that carry air, and the tubes that carry blood, and they come into contact with each other. And that place where the tubes that carry blood and the tubes that carry air come together, those membranes that contained all those tubes in that particular shape, we call those membranes lungs. So these things called lungs are literally air sacs that have blood vessels that come into contact with the air. We need to get the blood in contact with the air, and so that we can exchange the gases that need to be exchanged. You'll have notice that the respiratory system has these cavities or openings. They have the nose and the mouth. They come into the trachea into the lungs, and of course it keeps splitting and splitting, branching into very much like we talked about when we talked about evolution, into kind of a tree with a bunch of branches. You have here in the urinary system, you have your kidneys that are connected. Again, the blood vessels come into contact with the kidneys that filter out the blood and take the urine and put it into the bladder. The bladder then allows you to excrete it out through the urethra. You have the gallbladders involved in the endocrine system, which is your hormones. We'll talk more about that when we talk about molecules. You have cells, different types of tissues. You have your heart. You have your eye. We talked about cells just a second ago. You have the skin. You have the musculoskeletal system. All the parts of the ear, the hearing. This is part of your nervous system. So all the senses that you have, those 5 senses, are all part of the nervous system, because you have the thing about the nervous system is that you have to have information going into the brain, and you have to have information coming out of the brain. And both going into and out of, when we're going into, we're talking about the senses, which really are made of nerves. And when we're talking about information coming out, we're talking about nerves. Nervous tissue. So we're talking about different kinds of nervous tissue that allow for information to come in and information to go out. And of course, when information goes out, usually for humans, it's in the form of motion or movement. And when information is coming in, it could be visual, all right? It could be light, it could be touch, it could be smell, it could be hearing. And actually, when you break it down, you'll see that the various forms of information are just kind of small twists. The ways we receive this information, for instance, hearing. When we receive hearing, it's actually very similar to touch. But we'll talk more about that later as we look deeper into each of the cell types that allow us to actually sense these different kinds of input. I wanted to quickly mention tissues, and tissues is just the different cell types that make up organs, all right? And remember, organs group together, make up an organ system. So when we're talking about, for instance, cartilage, we talked a lot about cartilage. That soft part of your bone, of your body, that your nose and your ear, that is similar to bone but not quite bone, looks like that. Or bone looks like this. 2 different kinds of cells. This would make a nose, and this a bone in your body. It's simply because of the types of material that make it up produce a different quality of structure. So structure and function, right? Structure and function. So we take a look at the intestinal villi. There are a bunch of spaces. If you take a really close look at these spaces here, all right, a space here and here, that allows for the absorption for the material to go from here into the cells. So we got food materials and nutrients here, they go into the cells. While they're still here in this blue, where the little blue dot is, while the material's still there, it is not inside the body yet. It's not inside the body until these cells allow it to come into the body. So these cells actually guard the body against toxins and absorb all the things that they need to absorb for the body to get energy, proteins, nutrients into the blood into the different cells in the body. The skin protects us. Here the skin protects us from the outside and is made of epithelial cells. You see the layers. So skin's not just a layer, it's many layers, many dermal layers that each layer has its own function, and as you move progressively outwards, the layer gets thicker, and actually the outermost layer is dead skin cells that are sloughed off and become dust really quickly. Adipose tissue is a fat tissue, and you'll notice that how thick and fluffy they look. They hold the fat. They're very large, and they get larger and larger as more and more fat comes in. If too much fat comes in, they split, and you get many adipose cells holding in all the fat. Now, when you need energy, that fat then goes in the opposite direction. So when food comes in, too much food comes in, it gets put away as fat. When you have not enough food, it comes out as energy. Okay, neural tissue. This is what your nervous cells look like when you look in a nerve cell. You look at a nerve and you look at it underneath the microscope. The way you have different tissues over the week, you'll notice that this neural tissue. This is what it would look like if you looked at it in a real high magnification. Your cardiac muscle looks like this. Your skeletal muscle looks like this. Notice the difference in how they look. Their structure defines their function. The cardiac muscle has to keep pumping all the time, and it's made of these striations, a very striated muscle, very very thin, kind of layered out muscle. Where the skeletal muscle tissue is made more for strength and more for bursts of strength. So your skeletal muscles aren't meant to keep going 24/7, while your cardiac muscle is meant to go 24/7. You'll notice that the cardiac muscle is a lot more red. There's a lot more blood in cardiac muscle. That's because there has to be really good blood circulation, or that poor muscle will not be able to function, and you'll die. Okay, that's about it for the skeletal system and for the different systems of the body that's going to be on the test. If you know these different parts, make sure you know your different organs. Make sure you know your the levels of organization. Make sure you know everything in the study packet they got last week. Make sure you understand the packet, the cat muscle, the cat systems. The cat systems is an example of all the different body systems that are listed in your study guide. Now you have to use that example and also your dissection to be able to identify any organs that might put on the test and identify what system they belong to. Also, what the function of that particular organ might be. So, if I give you a heart, you should be able to tell me it's in the cardiac system or the circulatory system, and that its function is to pump the blood. If I give you a set of kidneys, you should be able to tell me, well, these are kidneys. They belong to the urinary system. They filter out the toxins from the body and and produce urine. If I give you a bladder, it holds the urine until you're able to excrete it. Urethra is the tube where the urine goes out of the body. Lungs is where the gas exchange happens. A vein or an artery is what's carrying the blood. The skin is the stuff that keeps foreign material out of the body. The intestine allows for materials to get absorbed into the body. The stomach helps to digest or break down the food. So these are all, anytime I give you any one of these organs, you should be able to point out and say, okay, this organ belongs to this system. The function of this organ is such. That, along with some general ideas of evolution that we discussed in class, and the material in this video is pretty much what the test is covering. All right, good luck studying.